Hello, everyone. Welcome to the web seminar, Developing a Disaster Recovery Plan for the Cloud Era That Actually Works, produced by IT Pro Today and sponsored by StorageCraft. Please note that this web seminar will be available on demand for 12 months starting tomorrow. If you have any questions for our speakers during the webcast, please feel free to type them in the question box on your webcast console. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Eric B. Rux has over 26 years in the IT industry. He has worked for the U.S. Navy, a large power company, higher education, the manufacturing industry, and is currently the IT director for the K-12 school in Eastern Washington State. When Eric isn't trying to keep the school children off of inappropriate websites while at school, he is running his own IT consulting company and helping local businesses with their IT challenges. Eric's area of expertise includes Microsoft Server, Active Directory, desktop management, Office 365, disaster recovery, as well as Google G Suite offerings. He has written numerous articles on topics such as Exchange disaster recovery, merging Active Directory after one company buys another, mass deploying iPhones to staff, and many others. Eric wrote a monthly column on Windows Home Server directed at the home user. Junior Silva is a lead product manager at StorageCraft, delivering the next-gen platform of the future today. Junior understands IT challenges inside and out through working in various IT roles and has extensive experience with public and private cloud migration and DR. He has held many certifications over the years and was one of the youngest Microsoft certified systems engineer in the world at age 17. Junior is passionate about technology and innovation that transforms the IT industry. And with that, I'll hand things over to Eric.
Well, thanks, Linda. I appreciate the introduction. Well, let's get started. So first, a little bit about me. As you mentioned, I've been in IT for quite some time now. I think I just passed 27 years in IT. I started working on mainframe computers when I was in the U.S. Navy, and have really just grown with the industry. And like many of our listeners, I'm challenged with disaster recovery and disaster recovery planning and trying to convince management that this is something that we need to pay attention to now, not when we drive in the parking lot in the morning and see our building on fire. I want to take a moment to talk about the cloud trap, what I call the cloud trap. I say this a lot when I discuss the cloud, and you all know this. The cloud is just a marketing term. As an IT professional, we know the truth, and that is that the cloud is nothing more than somebody else's server that lives in someone else's data center that you do not control, and frankly, that you can never visit, right? When we put it in terms like that, the cloud doesn't automatically seem like the perfect solution. The cloud is a good solution, no doubt. We could have an entire webinar discussing how it has saved me and all of you in time management and budget. For many of my services at the school, instead of hiring yet another IT tech, I was able to farm out the service to those that can perform the task more efficiently due just to the economy of scale. And that's because it's simply cheaper for 100 school districts to hire a few database administrators than for each school to hire their own. But again, back to our slide, the cloud is just your server living somewhere else. If that server lived in the basement or in another building in your company or school, you would never think of forgetting to back it up or have a disaster recovery plan. But because of that magic word cloud, we somehow forget about disaster recovery. One excuse I hear about this forgetting about disaster recovery is RAID. Well, we're pretty sure that the cloud vendors are using some sort of RAID. Heck, we use RAID on our own data center. I want to take just a moment to briefly describe what those RAID levels are, just as a review. RAID 0, as you probably know, is striping, but RAID 0 provides no redundancy. The way I remember that is with zero redundancy. RAID 1, mirroring, one drive mirrors to the other. The way I remember that is RAID 1 wastes one drive. So if you have two 1 terabyte drives, combine them together, you still only have 1 terabyte because you waste one drive. But If that drive fails, don't worry, you can still get your data back. RAID 5, kind of the best of striping and mirroring. That's striping with parity. With RAID 5, we can lose one disk and one disk only. There is such a thing as RAID 6 where you can lose two, but we don't talk about that here. RAID 10, again, kind of the best of striping and mirroring, so that's mirroring with a stripe. So that wastes a lot of disk, but it's much faster, and if you lose one disk, you don't lose the whole thing. But what do these RAID levels not protect us against? And that is the things like what we call stupid user tricks, right, where they delete that Word document. If you delete a Word document from a mirrored drive, it is going to delete that delete that file on the other drive as well. So now you have a complete mirror of the missing file. Also doesn't protect you against fire, theft, or flood. So you can have the best RAID in the world, but if somebody steals your server and walks out the door, that RAID is not going to help you. So yes, important, but not an appropriate backup or disaster recovery or business continuity plan. Five nines sounds pretty impressive, and it is, no doubt, but what's important to remember is what does that mean exactly? What does 5 nines mean? It's kind of turned into a marketing term. The next slide breaks down how many actual minutes you will be down depending on that reliability matrix. So I've copied this chart from Wikipedia. Thank you, Wikipedia. I've circled the infamous 9 5s here. Now, Google just had an outage about, 2 or 3 weeks ago. That outage was somewhere around 4 hours, depending on what part of the world you live in. It was 4 hours for me. So that's about 99.95%, or what we say 3.5 nines. It is important for us to understand the availability that our cloud vendors are promising. Is the uptime good enough for our needs? If they are out longer, are they going to compensate your company for your losses? And we probably know it's probably not, right? If they do have an outage and they don't recover quickly, what is your plan to get yourself back in business? Everything's in the cloud. What if that cloud vendor does the unthinkable and goes out of business? How are you going to get your data back? That's really important things we need to consider. So when I worked for the power company, we would hold a disaster recovery drill every single year, and we learned something every single time. The first year we learned that, hey, we could actually do it. We'd start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, and we would work all weekend long until the developers could come in Monday morning and actually test the servers and the services to make sure they worked. We also learned that it darn near killed us. We stayed up all night, all weekend, and when we came back Monday, we were done. We were both physically and mentally spent. And so that left the tasks of continuing onto the less experienced, more junior personnel. And we also learned that, even Superman needs to sleep. So the next year we made some adjustments. We still verified that we could recover the same services, but this time we used the junior personnel during the disaster recovery part of the drill. And so they learned how to do the recovery so that we could still be fresh and mentally available Monday morning when the developers came in. And then we set ourselves up a place to sleep. We rented a motel room down the road. Everyone brought their sleeping bag, slept on top of the bed in your bag so that multiple people could use the room throughout the weekend. And again, Monday morning, we could actually function. So we would not have thought of those things if we would have never practiced. If we would have just done a real disaster because the building burned down, come Monday morning, everyone expects the services to work, and the IT department is sound asleep. So that doesn't work. So just those little things you don't think about, you need to practice. The first drill taught us that some servers and services could not be recovered. Instead of getting into trouble, I guess, with management, our management team really had an amazing attitude that finding failures is exactly why we test in the first place. It was a wonderful lesson to learn. As long as we documented what we found and put steps into place so that it didn't happen again the next year, everyone was happy. Everyone was okay with a failure because it wasn't really a failure. We had discovered that we were not able to recover something. Just a great attitude from management. So I would really encourage you to try to coach up, if you will, that a failure to recover during a drill is not a failure as long as you learn and correct from it. Something we need to talk about is knowing when to recover and when to rebuild. So I just have a couple of examples here. Database server. You may do a bare metal restore and recover the whole thing, but maybe not. Maybe it's better to install the operating system yourself, the database software yourself, and then just recover the database. Same thing with file servers. If you're using DFS or distributed file services, you may not even need to recover to the exact same server name. Maybe you can recover the file somewhere else and just redirect the users and their map drives to that location. Domain controllers. I'm sure you struggle with trying to recover domain controllers. They don't always like to be recovered, and then we have to deal with the authoritative and non-authoritative restore. I found that for domain controllers, I don't recover them when there's a disaster. We should have at least two, so one should be up somewhere, either another building or across the world, and then I just surgically remove that failed domain controller using the NTDS util, and then just rebuild it from scratch. So there's times when you don't recover, you just rebuild. And then application servers, if you have custom applications, those are going to be on a case-by-case basis. But again, that's why we do the disaster recovery drill, is to actually see what works and what doesn't. It's a much better feeling to drive into that parking lot with the building on fire, knowing that, hey, we test this every year. We have a pretty good chance of actually recovering and staying in business. I'm sure you've seen this dialogue or a dialogue, something similar on your server, on your backup server. And this is a little mantra I came up with years ago. Backups always work, restores never do. So how many times have we seen that report on the screen where the backup is successful? I once gained a customer because of this prompt. He had been backing up his Exchange server nightly, and the prompt on the screen told him that the backup was successful. And it was. It was successfully backing up what he told the program to back up, and that was the C and the D drive. What it didn't back up was the Exchange database full of emails and contacts. So when the server crashed and the database became corrupt, he attempted to recover the database only to find out that that database had never been backed up. So I spent the night running defrag and air fixing utilities on that database until it would finally mount. They did lose some emails and some contacts, but most of the data was there. He learned a valuable lesson, and I gained a customer for life. However, this is not how he would have liked to have learned that lesson, and I'd rather earn customers in other ways. But the story's still a good one. Backups always work. Restores never do. We need to remember to actually test the restore process to ensure that the backups that we are running are actually really working, and that we have a good process in place to know if that's really happening. So I used to teach at a couple of local community colleges, and during one of the lectures, I would take some time out and ask the class to pair up and ask them to come up with an appropriate disaster recovery plan. I went too far, sorry about that. Come up with an appropriate disaster recovery plan. I have them use diagrams, charts, timelines, etc. After about 15 minutes or half an hour, I would bring the class back together, and they would briefly present their plan. They would usually be good, sound backup and recovery plans, but they would, of course, couldn't answer some of the most basic questions. And that was like, how much data can the company lose? How new must that data be? In other words, can they live with last night's backup, or do they need the backup from the last second or the last hour or the last couple of hours? How long can the company be without their data? So the building's burnt to the ground, how long can they be before they actually have customers angry because we can't look them up in the database? How much budget does the company have? So this is important because, of course, all companies say that they can't lose any data and they can't be down at all, which is completely possible, but that costs a lot of money. So how much budget do they have? Maybe they can only afford to have last night's data. And then who can recover the data? Meaning, if the IT department is lost, and I think you know what I mean there, is lost at the same time that the building is lost, who is trained to recover the data? Not something we want to think about, but something that we need to prepare for. And it was always amazing to teach this part of the class because this was one of those amazing teaching moments. You could see the light bulbs turn on in their head. They were realizing that the IT department cannot design a robust disaster recovery plan without the input from the business. So I remember backing up to, and of course it doesn't get any worse than this, restoring from tape. Talk about crazy slow and so prone to errors. It seemed like we always had that one tape drive that would produce tapes that only that one server could read. If you take it to another server, that server couldn't read it. Just a mess. Now the tape drive that I'm showing here is probably older than most of you. It's similar to the one that I used when I was in the Navy. The scale is a little bit difficult to judge from this PowerPoint slide, but this would fit in the top half of your refrigerator. So I'm, of course, not suggesting that you use this thing, or you can even get it to work, but it's good to remember that old technology is old and that we always need to take a moment to ask ourselves if there's something better, is there a better solution to the problem? Today we back up to hard drives and now even the cloud. What's next after that, I don't know, but history has taught me that I always need to be looking for a better, faster, more reliable solution. Something else to consider is after we figure out what we're going to back up to, what are we actually going to recover to? So are we going to have the exact hardware available? If we do, we have to consider the cost of having that hardware sitting on the shelf, either cold or hot, but not actually providing value add to the bottom line. Those devices, as they sit there, are not used in production. So is that a good use of your budget? Are you going to recover to a virtual machine? Can you recover to a virtual machine? Maybe you can save some money that way. Or maybe the cloud. And if you do recover the cloud, how much is that going to cost you? So again, do you have cold cloud, if you will, sitting out there that you're paying for that you're not actually able to use in production? That's something to consider for your disaster recovery plan as well. Not that it's bad to have to pay for that, because disaster recovery and business continuity does cost money, but that's something to consider. How much is that going to cost you? We really don't need yet another task on our day, but at the same time, we need to know if our backup solution is working. What does that look like? Is that a monitor on the wall showing us that the backup is successful? Is that an email in our inbox every morning telling us that that backup is successful? How often are we actually checking those backups, either with the logs or doing an actual restore? We need it to be hands-on enough so that we know it works. So again, when you drive in that morning and the building's on fire, you have some comfort knowing that you actually can get this business back up and running. But at the same time, we don't need yet another thing to do. What's that correct balance? That's something to consider as you're planning out your disaster recovery as well. So we will always have a backup and recovery solution in place for our local servers right now, or at least I hope you do. As we add a cloud infrastructure to the mix, do we want to add yet another different solution to the data center? So as we review disaster recovery solutions, consider whether you will need 2 or more software products to solve that same problem. Are you going to be looking at one screen to check the status of all your backups? Or are you going to have to review multiple dashboards to determine if your backups are successful? So what is the difference exactly between these two ideas, disaster recovery and business continuity? So I actually looked it up, and I found a really, really good explanation from CIO Magazine. And they start off with disaster recovery as being a plan that focuses mainly on restoring the IT infrastructure and operations after a crisis. It's actually just one part of a complete business continuity plan, such as a business continuity plan. And a BC plan looks to disaster recovery. And then they go on to discuss what a business continuity plan is. And they say a business continuity refers to maintaining business functions or quickly resuming them in the event of a major disruption, whether caused by a fire, a flood, or malicious attack by cyber criminals. A business continuity plan outlines procedures and instructions an organization must follow in the face of such disasters. It covers business processes, assets, human resources, business partners, and more. So as you're having this discussion with your management, make sure that the IT department is part of that business continuity planning. Make sure that they're not treating them differently. It's just the IT department. They don't need to be involved. That's not true. The IT department and the business functions need to work hand in hand to come up with an appropriate disaster recovery and business continuity plan. Well, again, as Linda mentioned, if you have questions, please be sure to type them into the box, and we'll get to them at the end. But now I'm going to pass it on to Junior Silva. He's the lead product manager for StorageCraft. Junior?
Thank you, Eric. We're excited to be with IT Pro today and Eric to talk about things that actually work or don't work in the cloud, some challenges, and I want to introduce a little bit of StorageCraft before we get to some of the solutions. StorageCraft, we've been around since 2003. We had developed technology that was leveraged by VMware in the beginning of early stages of snapshotting. We've been kings in the agent and physical protection to get bare metal restore and being able to virtual boot to get a machine up and running, virtualized without blue screen. Even up until at VMworld 2 years ago, I had people asking, like, wait a second, you just took that machine from Hyper-V and you spun it up in VMware and you didn't blue screen. And that's the part of the secret sauce that we have, the patent technology. And we want to keep leveraging that technology in this new world that it's coming along. Obviously, we're along all major verticals. You can see from on the marketing side, we are in engineering, we're in state, local, healthcare, technology, financial, higher education. I mean, you name it, we have a presence there. Traditionally, we were very channel focused, and it didn't get a lot of StorageCraft branding, but you're going to be able to see more of that StorageCraft branding as we go along. I'm here to talk about then a single solution, a single vendor that can solve some of the highest challenges that we have for creating a DR plan and business continuity. So one of the hardest challenges, we have exploding data growth. We have SLA windows shortening. We want to have higher RTO, smaller RTO windows so that you can have this continuity. So you have minimal data loss, and you're able to instantly get a machine up and running without having to wait minutes and hours to get it up and running. So I'm going to touch about on the OneSafe. We have ability to have CDP protection on the object stores. Your data can always be protected. It can be replicated to multiple sites. What we're here to do with StorageCraft, we don't mind or care which way you go for data protection. If you want to build your own data centers, we can support you on that. You want to do replication across multiple data centers, object store replication, so you're hitting on the storage layer and creating that storage fabric, we can do that. If you want to leverage, if you want to come out of the data center business, look, if we spend too much money on maintaining data centers, like Eric said, all that hard cost that's just sitting there, we want to go into as a service. We want to provide a DR as a service, so we have a solution for that as well. And then we wanted to have a single management experience, and that's what you're going to see in ShadowSafe, where it can manage your whole environment from a single pane of glass. So you're going to see you can manage storage, you can manage data protection, and you can manage your DR as a service in a single place. So what does that look like? Just to give you an idea, when talking about as applications also start going to the cloud, you also need something to protect the data. A lot of the cloud sits in a high availability. We have 5 nines. We have these things. Those are things saying, okay, we're going to have the machine available, but what about the data? And what you care about protecting is the data. And so sometimes you think, Office 365, you delete. There's delete files that are in SharePoint or deleted these things. A lot of user errors that's data related that's going to introduce. Well, your machine's going to be highly available. Yeah, you're going to have access to that mailbox, just the emails won't be in there. So what good is that if you can't restore the data? So you see a lot of companies going towards this kind of SaaS protection. So we protect Office 365, G Suite. And then also we have our DR as a service cloud. So this is a purpose-built cloud for the solution. So in the data protection, Eric talked about as well the idea of having, your backups are successful, but what about the rest of your plan? Because that's what really matters. It matters when you're going to restore. It doesn't really matter, okay, backups are good. It's like you need to have an ability to see all the way through all that information into a single place, and that's what ShadowSafe does. So you have your on-prem protection, so this is where you're going to protect VMware, Hyper-V, physical machines, bare metal restores, all of that, it's going to be in a single pane of glass. And you have the ability to instantly instantiate a physical machine on-prem, for example. The idea with DR and business continuity, you always have to be testing. Nothing replaces testing. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, it's a set and forget it, and you should never do that. We try to make it as easy as possible that you can set, that you can easily automate these things, so it's a less of a burden, but that never replaces actual testing of your virtualization, your testing for products. And also leveraging some of that, you're going to see some technology here we call a virtual boot, where it takes milliseconds for us to instantiate in VMware. This is the technology that we won the Best of VMware show 2 years ago, and we made it even better. And now you're going to see that's fully integrated into a solution. Office 365 SaaS protection, and then a purpose-built DR. We can click and select the machines, which ones are going to spin up first. You want your domain controllers to come up first, then you want your Exchange. All of that you can orchestrate and have it ready to go. So in the time that you need it, it's just executing the plan. So a little quiz for our DR as a service offering. What do Apple, Microsoft, Google, PayPal, Pure Storage, and other large banks have in common with StorageCraft? So we have presence in all the same data centers. So this is what we're building. We want to build something that's highly used and leveraged by companies that need to be highly available. So our solutions are built also in those same data centers. As we started this project, when we built our cloud 4 years ago, we needed something that was highly scalable, highly redundant, that you could robustly instantiate machines and then also give access to the full networking stack in your hands. And the reason for that, it's, again, we can do things, we can script things to spin up things in a public cloud, but it's orchestrating all of the secondary steps, right? Like Eric was saying, he tried to instantiate, and then there's like, okay, can you actually access the data? So we can spin up a machine, but it's like your customers, your employees need access to that data in those servers. And so things like complete access to the networking stack allows you to create the IPsec tunnels, the secure tunnels that you can for those machines. You can already pre-create the DNS rules to be able to access that in case of failover. And on the SaaS protection side, again, protecting Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, no agent necessary for the Office 365 and SaaS protection. Your data is stored in AWS or in Azure. You get to pick. If it's in Azure, it's in your own account, so you'll always have access to that data. So like Eric was talking again, if you have the data in the cloud and you need access to it, well, it's your own Azure account, so you have complete access. And then also, we never know when disaster is going to happen, so we wanted to focus on the self-service portals so you can access, search, and restore files and folders on at whatever time of the day. So if it happens at 3 in the morning, then you can do that and have access to that. The same thing with our DR as a service. It's a self-service platform, and you're able to do that. Just a little competitive look of, we talked about the ease of use and the testing that's involved. This is ShadowSafe. We did a little bake-off against Veeam 9.5, and just to show you the easiness of the solution. So total time of deploying the solution, under 5 minutes compared to instantiating a Veeam solution and putting in place. Time to the first backup, 10 minutes. So again, 10 versus 85. But look in the recovery part. This is where it really makes sense, that the number of clicks to instantiate an instant-on recovery. So we have 4 clicks. So what that means is we automated a lot of the solutions at the options that you have underneath to make that a successful restore. So because we don't want, if you have 22 different paths that you can go down, it's going to be 22 different ways or choices that you could be actually, in the end, not being able to access that data, and you have to restart the restore all over again with different options. So we wanted to make that really as simple as 1, 2, 3, and view the summary, and you click go. And then being able to also instantiate in milliseconds that machine. So I'm going to show a little bit of that, and let's take a look. Feel free to ask any questions, and I'll be taking a look and answering along the way as well. Okay, so this is our ShadowSafe instance. This was just a VM I just uploaded into our vCenter environment, and I'm going to access the console and just kind of go over some of the highlights. Over here, everything, this platform, we wanted to build a platform that was highly flexible, so it's future-proof. So all of this whole data protection platform is built on microservices. So these microservices, they're completely independent. They talk, all of these services, as they talk to each other, they talk over encrypted channels, so no data goes raw across the wire. And all of these services kind of bubble up into this system health. These services are also intelligent that, if your storage gets unmounted and it tries to remount, it tries to do some self-healing, so the platform itself everything can keep going. Because we depended on a lot of moving parts. We're dependent on vCenter. You're dependent on storage being available. You're dependent on internet access into the cloud. So all of that, it's built into this functionality. The second option that, as I interviewed customers, I interviewed a little over 100 customers for this design. And when we got to it, they always asked us, like, can you tell me, I want a big green across the top, and I want to log out. I have too much to do. And so we built it like that. All of the simplicity you're going to see, it's green across the top, you can log out. You know, what's the, you know, is the system up and running? Yes. Do I have any blind spots? Do I have anything that should be protected that I'm not protecting? And that's what this one comes in. And this is in real time as it gets updated. A lot of other solutions, it requires to deploy additional reporting software, running reports for 24 hours, an extra $300+ per socket, and then you're going to get a report 24 hours later to find out what this knows instantly. So really cool stuff. We wanted to bring it to the forefront. So if you can answer, is my system up and running? Are my machines, any unprotected machines that I should be protecting? And then the third is obviously what's the status of things that I am protecting. Also, resource utilization, you know, in an environment, how much data growth are you having? What's your average incremental data per day? And so we wanted to have a change rate and track that. You can change your storage. You can check the throughput in any data that's going on right now in the system if it's actively backing up. And again, in a single pane of glass, I'm managing my storage, my OneSafe devices with the object store with the CDP and offsite replication. I'm managing all of my backups and resource consumption. So pretty fun. It's super easy to get started if you look in the configuration. I'm just going to add a vCenter. It imports and discovers all the machines in that environment. The next step that we have is we add storage targets. So this is where it can be. Right now we have on our OneSafe, and it's talking through the microservices to, it's landing at encryption at rest on those devices. So you have gRPC directly over to the storage at rest. gRPC is a communication method that we use between these microservices. That's what Google uses for their servers behind the scenes, their backend, to actually communicate. It's really fast, and we wanted a protocol that we can expand and be highly scalable and super fast. So these are actually Docker containers that are sitting over there. Eric also talked about some of the future that's coming, you know, after VMs. We have Docker, Kubernetes. All of these things are going to come in place, and data is going to get more distributed. Data is already getting more distributed. You have some data on-prem. You have data in cloud. Different applications are putting data in different clouds, so you have kind of not only a hybrid cloud environment, now you have a multi-cloud environment. You have, depending on the application, it's in AWS. You're doing some genome DNA sequencing, and you're going to be in Google, and you're going to have data sitting in Azure on the Office 365. So it's already come to depending on the application, and so you need a place that you can bring all of that to. And containers are going to be a big part of that going in the future. And then you also have our DR purpose-built DR as a service cloud. I can add that target, and then what that looks like in the protection screen. All my machines show up. These are in Windows agents that are installed. They can be on physical or VMs. It gets a little tighter integration with VSS, and so you're going to get an application-consistent backup that's a little bit tighter than we're one of the only ones that still have a certified driver with Microsoft for these that VSS integration. So really critical in application consistency when you try to restore. Also, being able to tell where things are at. So I come down to, I can pick one of these machines. Let's see, 2016, 2012 servers. Let's see what these ones are like. So I can see right now with this machine, I can see the consistency of these recovery points. I can see where it's getting stored, but I can see also every other location where these recovery points are getting stored at. So I see in the cloud, I see, and then you can restore and test those points locally by selecting that cloud. So just in the recovery, if we wanted to test a recovery point that's sitting in the cloud, we can do that locally. This is where we talked about that 3-click failover. This where you can say, you notice that we are DRS aware. We know exactly what primary storage. We have all the native metadata. Anything that's going to make this a smooth process. Well, most of the time that you're trying to restore, you're trying to go back to the same location if there's a problem with the machine. And so we have all the native metadata, or you can change it as well. If you want to say, you know what, this used to be a two cores and 4 gigs, you can up that. You can attach networking if you want it to go live, and it shows only the network that's available in that host and cluster and data store. And then you have the ability to click next. If I go back one step, if you leave this recovery point optimal, we will pull only from the fastest location, or if you say, you know what, I want to test the recovery points that are sitting in your cloud, you can select that, and that's the point that we're going to be actually pulling down and talking with the cloud and instantiating that VM on-prem, and you're able to test that on-prem. Or if you want to test in our cloud, it also gives you the ability to be able to test that and orchestrate that. In our cloud, you're able to instantiate for up to 30 days without charging anything, no cost. And that's something that public cloud you just don't get, right? As soon as the machine turns on in the public cloud, the credit card's going to start ticking, right? And so depending on how long you're testing, it can wrap up quite a bill. So this is thousands of dollars of value add that you can have. Once a month, you can click the one-click provisioning to initiate your recovery plan that we have a patent on, and it starts up all the machines in the right order, all the networking, connects everything up, and you're able to spin it up for a day, take it down, and you're not charged anything. So we did it that way, so you have 30 days. So once a month you can do that, so 12 days out of the year, and then it also still leaves you a 2-week time failover that you can actually fail over until you get your systems up and running. But all of those things are value add. And the last thing I showed over here is just a dark mode. A lot of the disaster recovery happens at night, and so working with a really bright screen, it can make your tech's eyes sore. So we just have a dark theme that we expand to throughout the whole thing. With that, I'll pass it over to questions and see if I can answer anything.
Okay, thank you, Junior. If anyone has any questions for our speakers, please feel free to type them into your webcast console. It looks like we have a few, so let's get started. How often should a DR drill be practiced?
Well, that's a great question. For me personally, I like to check the backups, make sure they're actually functioning quite often. So every couple months at a minimum. But a full-scale disaster recovery / business continuity drill, I would suggest those once a year. And it really needs to not be an IT department-driven activity. It really needs to be, I guess, coming from the C-suites, if you will, that this is a business recovery, not just an IT recovery.
Okay, well, thank you, Eric. Now, another question is, what's the difference between your cloud and the public cloud?
Great question. So the public cloud is, you have all the services available that you can create your business continuity and DR. The StorageCraft DR as a service cloud, it's a purpose-built cloud for DR. So you're going to have everything pre-built, so you're going to have that recovery, not only instantiating, but connecting it back to your on-prem and automating all of that so it's ready to go. So we've kind of taken the hard part out of that. An example that I like to use is the public cloud. You go to Amazon, you click services, and it fills up the whole screen. Last time, I don't know, it was over 80, 90 services. So it's kind of like, can you build a house? Yeah, here's Home Depot, and here's Lowe's or Home Depot, and yeah, you have all the things that the materials in there to build a house, but when it's purposely built for that, we already built that house for you, and all you need to do is just move in. And so we allow you and make it very flexible, so you can do that and achieve the purpose that you're trying to do, which is fail over and fail back to your on-prem when you have the site back up and running or the machines back up and running you need.
Sorry about that. Can't I build a DR plan with the service the public cloud provides?
Thank you. That's kind of in the same similar idea. Yes, you can. You can get a couple developers. You start bringing up some of the services, depending where you're gonna do that at. If it's gonna be in Azure or AWS. And you can start scripting and doing all those things in place. The maintenance cost, that's always the hardest thing, is like, well, how much is it actually going to take for you to implement that? And the whole time that you're developing, that you're testing, there's those things, there's additional costs. Anything you want to do in the public cloud, it's going to cost you. So yeah, you can absolutely get a team of developers and start building with those services. The good thing with, we take all of that away, so you don't have to do all of the hard work, and new APIs come in or new changes. We maintain that for you because we're already maintaining for petabytes of data already for our customers. So you don't have to worry about that, but you absolutely can. It's kind of like that Home Depot build your house analogy.
Okay, here's one for you. This looks great for large-scale operations, but do you offer affordable solutions for SMBs?
Great question. Yes, we absolutely do. The pricing, there's very flexible pricing that you can choose how you want to spend those dollars. If you want to do a monthly, there's those options as well. You can go and do a monthly type of service. You can do a yearly and get additional discounts. All of those are up to you. You can just get a block and say, you know what, I want a terabyte block in your cloud and fit as many machines as you can, or I want 10 terabytes, whatever you want. There's a flexible solution for that.
Okay, next one. Why do I need to protect Office 365?
Yes. That's again, goes to that availability. Eric talked about that, where availability means that the service is going to be running, but it doesn't mean that the data, that your data is going to be there. Your data is your responsibility. So Microsoft will make it available and show in the cloud, oh yeah, here your account's running. But if something is scripted or an API or something deleted or accidental user deletions, and that's the crux. It will always exist, human error. I deleted that special PowerPoint and I deleted these emails and now I can't get them back. All of that, the data is your responsibility, even in the public cloud.
Okay, here's one. How are the backups conducted? You mentioned agentless, but the demo clearly notes agents. Do you support both? What OSs do you have agents for?
Great question. So it does support both. It's agentless and agent. If you notice in the demo, you could see there was a VM where those are doing it did a discovery through vCenter, and it's just searching. It's going to be doing an agent-based protection or agentless protection. Excuse me. And if you need, you can install an agent there was always this argument, agentless versus agent, and there's absolutely best cases for both. The agentless, the simplicity, the ease of use, it's awesome. And there's also still a physical machine. You can't really do an agentless backup on a physical, so you have to install an agent. No matter how much virtualization we have, there's kind of these lingering physical machines or these transactional databases that are in VMs now that you really want a tight VSS integration, for SQL and Exchange, if you still have it on-prem, that you want that tight application consistency and VSS integration. And so that's why there's the use cases, but we support both.
Okay. So do you prefer physical backups, P2V, or V2P?
I prefer the best method that's going to have the most reliability that I can actually get my data back. So the nice thing about the P2V and V2P, P2V, it's nice because you can't test like updates to a server and still get an actual, test installing or testing an update. You can do it in a virtual environment where you can just spin it up instantly with that virtual boot technology I showed, and then test whatever you want to do and take it down, and nothing, it didn't cost you. If you try to do that on a physical machine and go test an upgrade on a physical machine and that goes down, now you have to restore a physical machine, and that's going to be a lot more costly of your time to do that. So I prefer testing things in virtual environments and then allowing them still, if you still need it, you can put it to a physical machine at that point.
Okay. Would MSPs refer individual clients directly to you, or would they manage them all and use your services strictly through the MSP?
Both. Our cloud it's built that they can have a direct. If you want to directly come to our cloud, you can do that. But also, if you're using a managed service provider, you can leverage them. The nice thing about leveraging a managed service provider is that now you have, they're in charge to make sure that all those things are up and running, but you know that they can go and spin up and test your machines in our cloud without any charge and give you those reports so they can keep showing their value add to you as they keep the DR plan up and running.
Okay, so here's this one. What kind of bandwidth do you need to be effective?
Depends on how much data you're putting up. So if the data, if it's too much data, so terabytes, you have 10 terabytes of data that you got to put up to our cloud, and you have small bandwidth to the internet, right? So you can't do the initial upload. We have services where we send either bigger drives or the bigger appliances that you can get the data in seed. So kind of like, imagine kind of like AWS has the same problems, right? Everyone, as you start growing, it's, hey, I have too much data that's going to take a month for me to get the data up to your cloud. You don't want to be risking a month that you could have already been protected. So it's faster to just copy a local and then ship the drive to us, and we can do that. So it's just a flat cost, it's like $20, and we can do that.
Okay. Does your yearly plan include testing the remote site? After a fire, it may be days before the fire department lets you back into the building due to hazmat, power, etc.
So I think this is going to depend on your use case a little bit, but we have the ability to spin up those machines, and if however long you need to have the running in our cloud. I mean, after 30 days, there's obviously you get charged on a per day basis after that. So you can definitely keep running indefinitely in that cloud. It's obviously not as economical as probably on this case. You would get a temporary site set up, something off-site, and get the data back to that site. but everyone's going to be a little bit different for VR. This is a special use case, but you can definitely keep the machine running in our cloud as long as you need it.
Okay. Can you pull a single file out of multiple file systems, NTFS or ext4? What would the process be?
Yes, you can. When the machine is sitting in our cloud, you can browse its file systems, and both of those are covered, and you can pull those files out. There's a portal. I want to touch on this. That's a good point. It's a self-service portal, so it's available 24/7. So even if your local site is completely gone, you can still access that.
Okay. Do you include a kit or cache of equipment to put together the remote locations? Is that tested too?
If you're using our OneSafe devices, we have that's our converged devices. They are with data protection and scale out object store, kind of like a Cohesity or Rubrik. Those devices, obviously, if you have it on each site, it would include remote locations and testing those devices along. You don't have to have our storage, and that's where ShadowSafe is a virtual-only appliance, and you can just use, hey, I already have a lot of storage. I just need the data protection and the DR as a service. That's where this virtual appliance comes in, ShadowSafe.
Okay, here's another one. How does the user access your cloud after a recovery, either from the office or from home?
Great question. It's a portal. It's a web portal that you access. So it's storagecraft.com, and we have a portal facing that you log in, and then inside you have also, dual authentication, so you can do the restores and perform those actions. You're going to say, hey, I want to restore at this point in time. I want to pull these files down. I'm going to enter the password you set for those backup images again, and then you would have access to that.
Okay, it looks like we have time for one last question. Data across borders from one country to another. How to handle security challenges?
Yes, so we do have our cloud, those data centers that we use. We have it in multiple locations in the U.S., also certain places like in Europe that you have restrictions against, the data can't leave Europe or things like that. We also have data centers there, Australia. So all over the world, depending on the use case, we would have to understand which countries we're referring to here. Does StorageCraft have any? I saw one question here. Does StorageCraft have any customers in the financial service industry? Yes, we do. We have a lot of them. If you go back to the initial slide on the recording, you'll be able to see some of those. You can contact us if we can questions as well.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we've run out of time, so thanks to Eric and Junior for the presentation and to StorageCraft for sponsoring today's webinar. Just a reminder, this webinar will be available on demand starting tomorrow, so feel free to come back and review. Thank you for attending, and have a great day.